Hi, everyone, and welcome to this session on financial inclusion and risk protection for a resilient society. We're really happy to welcome you all to this today. I'm joined by two fabulous speakers today. Leila Hosni, who is Head of CSR and Sustainable Development Office at Alex Bank. She is currently tasked with the development of the bank's multifaceted approach to sustainable business, community investment, and creating shared value. She's a member of the Federation of Egyptian Bank Sustainability Committee and advises NGOs and corporations on their community investment programs. She founded the Inspiration from Egypt initiative, which has empowered thousands of craftsmen via financing, training, and consultancy, changing the landscape of the Egyptian handicrafts industry. She holds a bachelor's degree from the American University of Cairo and an MSc in social business and entrepreneurship from the London School of Economics. We're also joined by Leslie Ndlovu, who's CEO of Africa Risk Capacity. He was the former CEO of AXA Africa Specialty Risks, a Lloyd's of London insurance syndicate, and has extensive international experience spanning 14 years across corporate finance, audit, tax advisory, insurance, and investment management sectors in several countries, including Bermuda, Singapore, France, and the UK. He is a graduate of the University of Oxford in the UK and the Institute of European Administration Affairs in France. He's a CFA charter holder, a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of England and Wales, and a member of the Institute of Directors. So a fantastic and highly qualified panel with us today, which we're very, very happy about. We're going to begin the session with an introduction to the PRB's commitment to inclusion. I will present a bit of background information about where we've got to and what that's going to involve. And then we're going to have a chance to hear from Leila and Leslie about the work that they do and how financial inclusion is relevant to their work. And then we'll have a chance for a bit of a discussion, and then they will sum up at the end with some closing thoughts. So hopefully it will be very enjoyable for everybody, and I'm 100% sure it's going to be a stimulating discussion. So I'm just going to share my screen so that you can see the slides. Okay, excellent. All right. Fantastic. Okay, so now you should be able to see the slides there. This is going to be a short presentation just to introduce you to the new commitment to inclusion that we are developing within the Principles for Responsible Banking. We've done some scoping work already, and we are going to, I'll cover the work that we've done to date and talk about where that's going to go. So we have been looking at definitions of what we mean by financial inclusion and financial health, and we've decided to describe financial inclusion as democratizing financial services and leaving no one behind. And the associated concept of financial health, or financial well-being as it's sometimes talked about, is a state in which a person or organization can smoothly manage their current financial obligations and have confidence in their financial future. So that is about resilience and people's ability to imagine and plan for the future. And these two definitions were developed as part of the development of the guidance for target setting on financial inclusion and financial health, which is available. It was launched recently and is available on the UNEP website. And alongside that, we also developed some target setting guidance on gender equality, because this is a concept which is highly, highly relevant, as we'll hear from the discussions that we're going to have later on, to financial inclusion, because it's an issue that particularly affects women. And so this is the place in which the Principles for Responsible Banking will be exploring issues of equality, primarily of gender, but also of the other factors that can affect financial inclusion. So as part of developing that guidance, the incubation group that worked on that developed a model that we are using as the basis for our understanding of financial health and well-being, as the overarching idea that covers things like your ability to manage your day-to-day finances, to plan for future goals, and that also covers financial education and digital skills. And within that overarching bigger theme of financial health, there is the issue of financial inclusion, which of course is relevant to the most vulnerable, where maybe people don't even have access to the most basic services such as bank accounts, initial bank accounts, or any form of loans. And so that is a particular area of focus. And we explored the things that can enable and inhibit that work, and of course vulnerability and equality are a major part of that. We explored what equality and vulnerability may mean in this context, and so there's a whole range of different aspects. And as with everything within the principles for responsible banking, the particular issues of vulnerability and equity that are relevant will be determined by the context in which you're operating. And so we will hear some more about what that means for the Middle East and Africa regions in our discussions later on. And here's some suggestions of these are the topics that were covered as part of the development of that guidance to give some sense of what that might look like. As part of developing the commitment to financial inclusion, we're going to be exploring two key questions, and that is, what should we cover in relation to a commitment for inclusion, and how will we be able to develop a commitment statement that encompasses all the aspects of this topic, which is very broad and diverse and means different things in different locations. And also, what do ambitious targets look like in this context? So there are lots of banks doing very incredible work already, but there's a long way to go to ensure that everybody is included. And so how can we make sure that we're setting ambition levels at a relevant point to really make that happen in practice? So some of the work that we have done so far to explore what this might look like was with a subgroup of the banks, the signatory banks to the Principles for Responsible Banking. And we came up with a few key themes that have emerged as being important at this point, and this is forming the basis of our thinking. And obviously from here, we're going to develop that in sophistication and depth. The first point to make is that the commitment will be very much about implementing the requirements that banks have as signatories to the Principles for Responsible Banking. Financial inclusion has been selected by a very significant proportion of banks as one of their primary impact areas, and so we need to make sure that the work that we're doing really helps with the implementation of that. Any consideration of this topic has to take into account the variety of different contexts and appropriate actions that might be relevant to different banks, and so that it needs to be versatile and broad in its considerations. And also the fact that at this point in time data is very difficult to get hold of, both on the scale of the challenge that we are tackling and also the work that's being done. In terms of the issues of what actually the content of such a commitment might look like, we have touched on the idea of financial health and inclusion, and there's an emerging sense of the continuum of getting somebody from being unbanked to banked and not stopping there, taking everybody through on a journey to financial resilience effectively. And we need to make sure that we're thinking about how we're structuring our thinking to ensure that that's the journey that we're on. As we'll see as we go through our conversation later in this topic, the banking sector can't do this alone, and it requires collaboration with a wide range of partners, and that's going to be absolutely critical to achieving anything on significant scale. And beyond that, what is it that banks need to be disclosing to be communicating transparently about what needs to be done and what's actually being achieved? We're delivering this in quite a tight timescale, so we're hoping to have the commitment launched by mid-October this year. And that will just be the start of the journey, because obviously the work will be done beyond that to actually realise the commitment in practice. But there'll be a process of consultation with the incubation group between now and then, and a number of the external stakeholders who are involved with the project through the civil society advisory body, for example, so we can make sure that we're getting a broad range of perspectives. So that is a very quick gallop through the process of the collective commitment and where we're up to now. And so it's my great pleasure to be able to hand over to Layla and Leslie now to present some of the work that they've been doing in their respective organisations. So Layla, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Rachel, and it's a pleasure to be with you all here today. We are a proud member of the UN Responsible Principles, and we are very happy that we are part of Intesa Sanpaolo Group. This is our parent company. It's the biggest Italian bank and the third in the European Commission, and Alex Bank is following the strategy of ESG and inclusion in all our operations, especially in CSR and inclusion. And I'm happy to give you a quick brief about Alex Bank before telling you or dig deep in the financial inclusion and what we have done in the last 2 years. So Alex Bank is an Egyptian bank. 80% is owned by Intesa Sanpaolo. It has its own CSR strategy that was launched 4 years ago, but next year we're launching our ESG strategy. And also for the next 4 years, we have moved or evolved from traditional donations and CSR to a complete CSV and inclusion responsible model or responsible inclusion model. We have been working a lot also on restructuring inside the bank. So the CSR reports now to the CEO of the bank. So it has a lot of empowerment and authority. We report to the board, and we also have been working with the business, especially with the microfinance and the small business units on financial inclusion and financial literacy, which are 2 hot topics for us at Alex Bank, but also for Egypt. And I will talk a lot about the context now because Egypt is putting financial inclusion, especially for women, on the top of the priorities. And we have targets also set by the president and by the Central Bank of Egypt. So in the financial inclusion part for Alex Bank, we have worked on three models. First of all, having Alex Bank as a citizen or as a premises accessible for all individuals, including people with disabilities, youth, and also rural women and old people or the elderly. And this has been worked in coordination with the Ministry of Planning and Helm NGO. So all our branches now in the next 2 years will be fully accessible for people with disabilities and all the segments of the society. This includes a change of the model of everything, including the ATMs, where is the tellers are located, how our ATMs are being done, if they're voice over or not. So we're working very much on this, and this is a huge investment, of course, working on this on a CapEx investment, but also we train most of our people in the branches to be able to accept or deal with people that are not usually targeted by banks. So this we've worked a lot on that. We have 30 branches. We have 179 branches of Alex Bank. 30 of them have been done. And in the next 2 years, we'll be finalizing with all our branches. And this is for us as a bank. Then we work on the financial literacy model, and we work on 2 things. We work on the youth population, and we have a program that is run in all the youth centers of Egypt. Egypt has like youth centers all over the governorates. We work a lot with the Ministry of Education and the Central Bank of Egypt to launch a lot of financial literacy programs that are coupled with our financial youth proposition. We have a loan for youth. We have also a debit card. It's a very attractive proposition. Also coupled with our ambassador, Mohammed Salah is our ambassador at Alex Bank. So we also couple it with to attract youth, to join banks with an attractive proposition. And we have another proposition called for children, which is called Hadi Bedi. It's the first board game in Egypt for children from the age of 6 years old to 12 years old that can play a board game and learn the concepts of financial inclusion, but also giving back. So it has a twist, and it's fully inclusive because it has also the braille. So it's also fully inclusive to all children in Egypt. Now we have a partnership with the Ministry of Education because we're launching the digital app on the 24th of June, and we will have a rollout across most of the governmental and private schools in Egypt where children can play together this game and learn the concepts of saving and giving back at the same time. And then I can talk about business. So on the business side, in financial inclusion, we have a big project with the Central Bank of Egypt and Vodafone and a couple of other companies where we were nominated the champion bank 3 years ago to pilot the village saving associations, that is the group lending between women in Upper Egypt and in rural areas. We wanted to digitalize this, and we're working with the National Council of Women and the Central Bank of Egypt now to onboard 4,000 women digitally on Alex Bank through the wallet. on how to be able to save together in the bank on a digital platform. And this has been completed as a first pilot. And now we hand it over to the Central Bank of Egypt and the National Council of Women to roll it out with all the other banks in Egypt. So we are very proud to have kicked off this with the Central Bank of Egypt and changed a lot in the regulations, because in the regulations of Egypt, group lending and lending together on the wallet, having also receiving interest on the wallet was a bit difficult. And this 2 years pilot project was able to do that. And we also work a lot with the microfinance teams on agribusiness and group lending to farmers. And this is also a very first step for Egypt. And we're doing it with the World Food Programme and the Central Bank of Egypt in coordination with the Financial Inclusion Unit at the Central Bank of Egypt. And we have kicked this project last year, and we have, we had the target and we have passed our target by 100%. So it's double the target, because farmers were, it was a very, very interesting pilot. And now we're working with trying to develop this with other industries like the tomatoes, now the potatoes and the oranges, because they are very good fruits, and agribusiness is developing a lot in Egypt now. So we're working on certain sectors and segments to be able to lend farmers and help them also group their lands together so they can take better loans. So that's what we're doing. And also we have another proposition other than the agribusiness. We're working a lot on the craft sector because we have our own proposition related to handicraft that was launched 5 years ago called Ibdam and Mas, Creativity from Egypt. And it is trying to move craftsmen from the informal economy to the formal economy, after, of course, helping them with all their scalability. And we have initiated the first crafts loan in Egypt, of course, in cooperation with the Central Bank of Egypt, but giving these craftsmen non-financial propositions. So like the marketing advice, less interest rates, of course, is the lowest rates in the market, help them with their taxation records and everything. This is like a bundle proposition. So they want to join because they can, get to go into exhibitions, also get some legal support and advisory support. So that's in a nutshell what we do. Without getting into numbers, we try to focus on 3 pillars. So inclusion at Alex Bank, the premise, and how our branches can be inclusive for people, and training our people to be inclusive as well, working on financial literacy for youth and children, and working on the business level to be more inclusive. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Leila. That was a whirlwind tour through everything that you do. Fantastic, thank you. Leslie, we'd love to hear about your work as well, please.
Thank you very much, and Leila, congratulations to you, because you are really doing a lot, and it's really heartening to hear that.
Thank you.
So I would like to maybe start by setting the scene that when you think about financial inclusion, I think for me the end game for this is about building economic prosperity, targeting the Sustainable Development Goals, so SDG 1, SDG 2, SDG 5 on the empowerment of women. And then also recognizing that the financial system works as an ecosystem. Today, we have the opportunity to talk about banking, but banking doesn't exist in isolation to the other financial services that are provided. You could look at specialist lending, you could look at microfinance institutions, but then I would like to speak about insurance, which will not be really surprising since I'm the CEO of an insurance company. So then if we build on the theme of how insurance and the insurance industry at large can work with other components of the financial sector to build resilience. First of all, insurance works as a de-risking mechanism. When you look at the population that is currently not included, or the population that is excluded from the formal financial services sector, their biggest need is around access to the operational bank accounts, allowing them to receive and to pay money. But also as important is access to credit, right? Because access to credit means greater investment in your business, which ultimately means better economic outcomes and greater economic prosperity. The reason why there isn't enough lending to the people that are being excluded by the current financial setup is because of the very high levels of perceived risk. So if you look at something like agriculture in Africa, where you have large numbers of small to medium scale farmers, they cannot access credit because they are highly exposed to the vagaries of weather, so excess rainfall, flooding, not enough rainfall, droughts. And the work that we do at the African Risk Capacity is to provide parametric insurance coverage against weather-related perils, droughts, floods, and tropical cyclones. And the beneficiaries of our insurance programs are the small to medium scale farmers. So the insurance that we provide then reduces the level of risk for the bank because the banks can then assess the credit worthiness of these individuals based on their characteristics and not so much on the weather, which they can't control, especially in the context of climate change, where we are seeing increasing frequency and severity of natural disasters. In this way, we are playing a big role on financial inclusion and building resilience and providing risk protection. So then maybe at this point, just to share a little bit more about the work that we do at the African Risk Capacity, or ARC as we refer to ourselves. At ARC, we provide insurance against the weather. It's parametric insurance, which means that the payout of claims is not dependent on the loss of each and every farmer, but is based on a model. So based, say, on the level of rainfall that has fallen in a country or in any geographical location, we can model what the impact of that is going to be on crop yields, and then compensate a farmer on the decrease in crop yields that they've suffered as a result of this. The main advantage of parametric insurance is just the speed of payout, because we can very quickly run the model and within a week have paid out a claim to a farmer, allowing them to bounce back and be able to continue investing in their farms. We also offer portfolio level insurance to financial institutions. So if they have given loans to farmers, then we can insure the banks so that if there's a drought, the bank will then experience a spike in defaults as a result of that, and then we can make the bank whole, which makes banks more willing to deploy more capital to providing loans and other financial services to people that would not traditionally qualify based on the traditional scoring mechanism. And again, this is an example of how the work that we do enables the banking industry in order to drive really financial inclusion, which is what we are here to all talk about today. So I will stop here, and of course, I'm very happy to listen to any comments or take any questions.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Leslie. That's really interesting. And it's great to have such diverse and perspectives coming at it, not just from banking, but from insurance side as well. So moving on to the discussion now, I'll put some questions to you and hopefully we can explore some of these issues a bit more. I was thinking that it might be interesting to explore why financial inclusion is moving up the agenda so much at the moment. What factors are affecting that, and why is it becoming so much more of a priority in the banking industry and the wider finance sector at the moment? I don't know if you guys have thoughts about that.
I mean, I can answer, and then Leslie, you can of course add. I mean, in Egypt, it has been announced that banks need to start working on financial inclusion and not just working on financial inclusion. So we were asked as banks to have a unit called Financial Inclusion Office that has to report to the CEO. This is by the Central Bank of Egypt, in order to enable banks to start working on campaigns. And we have campaigns every 3 months that we need to work in governmental areas, rural areas, places where people are not exposed to banking services. And these campaigns are made with free opening account services for 3 years for women. People can walk into the branch anytime, also coupled with an educational kit that it is given to all banks to give to finance. Why is this happening? Because I think the government is trying to support the population to move forward and out of poverty. And we think that also changing the traditional mind of banking. So banks now are working like us, trying to set partnerships like we're doing with the National Council of Women and the Central Bank of Egypt and Vodafone to couple together, and it's not a competitive edge anymore. We are, all of us, removing our interests and profits, and we're trying to move this. At the other point is, I think that's also the government is trying to have people formally included into banks in order to monitor better and to have a better reporting mechanism. So that's from our side.
Thank you, Laila. That's a very interesting perspective, because you are seeing the government taking steps to encourage the private sector. And I would add on to say that capitalism has no doubt been a very successful economic model. I think it's driven a lot of the progress that we see around the world. But we have gotten to a point, I think, where people are starting to question the sustainability of this model. And the big drawback is that it leaves quite a number of people behind. And then when also you think about the way the world is evolving in terms of major global themes, this idea of closing inequality gaps has also become extremely important. So also there is the point that Laila raised, that it's also about dignity of people. It's about lifting them out of poverty. It's about driving self-sufficiency. And all of these themes have been percolating for quite some time, and they have been encapsulated now, in the SDGs. And this really forms the basis for why there is this big move towards financial inclusion. And also now it's gotten to the point where historically, as Laila was saying once again, that the financial sector had paid some kind of lip service to it, viewing a number of these initiatives as philanthropic in a sense. But now we are seeing this increasingly as a business opportunity. So when you look at Africa in particular, just the number of people that need access to financial services, if you can figure out a business model that addresses the needs of all these people, you can then have a very profitable business that on the one hand can meet the needs of the shareholders in terms of generating returns, but can also serve a real good and purpose for society of large. And if you can combine that in one business, you will be extremely successful.
That's really interesting. Yeah. So one of the questions that emerges from that and from what you've both talked about already is that by taking financial inclusion as a priority right to the heart of the business, to some extent you're being challenged to think about how you're going about the business that you're doing and the products and services that you develop to meet new needs that haven't been taken into account necessarily before. It'd be really interesting to hear about how your organizations both do that at the moment, and also maybe thinking about this concept of what does ambitious look like in this context. Where do you go from here?
Sorry, Rachel, you were talking about the challenges, correct? Because my connection cut a bit.
Oh, sorry. I was talking about the fact that, yes, challenges in a way, and the idea that you're being pushed as a business to contemplate products and services and a way of operating that's different from before. And how do you go about doing that as a business? And what does ambitious look like? Where do you go next from here?
For sure. Well, for Alex Bank, I mean, we initiated a unit called Sustainable Finance for Development. It is the only bank that has this unit. This unit works with the business sections, like I said before, the microfinance and the small business, and now we're trying to be more inclusive, also going up, because women in general are better customers to banks. But in Egypt, it's a bit difficult, and we are trying to work a lot on gender equality and financial inclusion. But what I was trying to tell you is that when we started to work at Alex Bank, there was a lot of resistance from management. They didn't understand why the CSR, the unit that was called CSR, is now trying to drive business, working with NGOs, trying to lend farmers, trying to lend rural women. Why are we entering the CRGC committee and trying to operate? But now, after 1 year and a half or 2 years, they understand the possibility of making business, making sustainable profit, because they have seen in the last 3 years, and especially in the last year when we started to work a lot in agribusiness and our numbers are great, especially in this, how the numbers are sustainable. So it's sustainable growth. So this is one of the things that I can say is that I can see a shift in the business units and the business model on how they are even now more excited when they see the CSR coming in with a proposal. And we are working a lot on partnerships model. So we have an NGO, we have the bank, and then we have someone in the middle that can help also educate customers and people. So this is one of the highlights, I would say. But at the beginning, it was super challenging because it is not a CSR, it is inclusive business. And now actually Alex Bank is going to change its model in CSR to be named ESG and responsible banking, in order to, like Leslie was saying, incorporating, this into the business arms of the bank.
Yeah, and the way I think about it is really the starting point for any enterprise should be figuring out the client demand, because as a business, it's really important that you're demand led. And once you have a very good sense of what the customer demand is, then you have to figure out really a delivery mechanism along 3 dimensions. What will it cost you to provide the product or the service? What will be the value that's created for the clients? And then what does the market look like? So for us at ARC, this is how we think about the market, and we have developed quite a number of products that are covering various aspects of the weather, but all really thinking about what the needs of the customer are. Then in addition to what Lila has said, this idea of collecting data is extremely important, because then that gives you a true sense of the benchmark, but also informs you whether you're making progress or not, and gives you feedback on what you should change. I completely agree with Lila once again that it's also about having this mainstream approach. And I like what you say about changing even just the name symbolically from CSR to ESG and responsible banking. Because if you are positioning this initiative as a feel-good type of thing, then it will never be sustainable. But if you are positioning it as a business opportunity, then I think you will have the attention of the people and also the willingness to put resources behind it. For us at the African Risk Capacity, I think our goal is quite clear. When you look at Africa, agriculture is an extremely important component of the economy, contributing 1/3 of the GDP and employing directly or indirectly 2/3 of the workforce. if you do the numbers, it means that there are up to 700 million people that could benefit from weather-related insurance. Currently, we provide coverage over a year to maybe 30 to 40 million people, but the need is a multiple of that. And then we're constantly thinking about how we're going to reach the partners, the clients. It's through partners. Banks are a big part of that through portfolio insurance, but we have aggregators, we have farming associations, cooperatives, governments, and so forth, because we really see the value of what we are doing. Then just going back to the idea that I espoused earlier in terms of the financial system working as an ecosystem, what we see is that as an insurance company, we have a big balance sheet, which we then also invest out in the financial markets. So we are also, on the one hand, working as a risk mitigation tool, but we're also making financing available, because we then buy government bonds, we buy bonds issued by the banks, we invest in infrastructure projects, roads, shopping malls, and so forth. And really, in working as part of this ecosystem, we are able to drive financial inclusion and also mitigate risks for the population at large.
So interesting. Yeah, thank you so much. So I think we've got just about time for one more question, and I'd be really interested. You did touch on it a little bit then, Leslie, but thinking about what does success look like if we were to achieve these goals? Not necessarily just for your organization, but maybe thinking more broadly across the sector.
I mean, if we want to, in my view, if we want to achieve sustainable growth and achieve our goals, digital is also very important in this area, and digital financial inclusion has been also on the top priority of the government, but also for accessibility, but also on Alex Bank. And in January, the government issued the Digital Financial Inclusion Initiative in January this year. So now we are trying to say how all the government will be paid, all the government employees will be paid on a digital platform. Nobody's going to be paid in cash. They're trying to move all the CSR activities also on the digital. So I think working on, changing a bit the mindset of the regulators. And I feel like this is what the banks and other institutions like the telecom are doing with the central banks of Egypt or other regions, especially in the MENA regions, that you can see this a lot, is how to incorporate digital into financial inclusion and having people open accounts, like what we're doing with the digital saving groups with women. We have seen this a tremendous success, because women, they don't have to go to the bank, but they have an account on the wallet, and they can save, and they can save with interest on that. So they see the benefit of time, because they can spend more time with their family other than going out the bank, and at the same time have it spot on their phones. So I think digital is one of the answers. And one of the challenges that we are working on as a bank, and we can see it a lot in Egypt, is the education and the literacy. We have seen that this is one of the biggest challenges for financial inclusion and for inclusivity in finance, is educating people. In Egypt, sometimes you have bankers that are not very educated on the concepts of banking, let alone people that you are trying to include. So coupling your initiatives with a good educational platform that is simple and can reach out to as many as possible. Thank
you. Yeah, and I would echo more or less the same sentiments, that really access to financial services is the bedrock of economic prosperity, because, as Lila was mentioning, people need to have a mechanism to save, because then savings mobilizes financing for other activities, especially in the financial sector. And in addition to savings, they also need access to credit in order to be able to buy homes, buy assets, invest in businesses. So really, financial inclusion is at the heart of this agenda. We need to be building an Africa that is stable, an Africa that is prosperous, and we cannot achieve any of these objectives without having very access to finance and to financial services at large. I also really liked what you said around digital as a key delivery mechanism. So a number of people have access now to smartphones or even to the older phones, such using USSD codes. So it's no longer about going to a branch, I think, of a bank to access financial services. Financial services really can be consumed directly by all those who need them from the comfort of their homes or their business. And even though there is still a lot of work, I think that needs to be done, we can celebrate the progress that we have made so far and also challenge ourselves to do more in the future.
Wonderful. That's really interesting. Thank you so much. So we are pretty much out of time. I would like to give you both the last chance to share any parting thoughts that you feel it would be really good to share on this subject, just as brief, succinctly as possible.
No, thank you, Rachel, so much. I just wanted to thank you so much and also thank Leslie very much on this amazing background. And I mean, we as Alex Bank and also as part of Intesa Sanpaolo Group are committed to numbers, with Egypt committed to financial inclusion, to a sustainable growth, to great financial education, also when coupling our customers with the services, especially when they're new to it. So it's a commitment from the bank. Thank you.
So maybe I will offer just three thoughts. So the first one is that the financial system is part of an ecosystem, and we need to have a holistic approach. Whatever we're doing needs to be driven by the needs of the customers, so client first, and then also finally. Digital channels give us the best tool possible to drive financial inclusion. And I believe with this approach, we're going to be extremely successful. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This is just such an inspiring topic to be thinking about, because it is about how the finance sector relates to us all as individual human beings. And I think that it is easy to lose sight of that sometimes when you're in the depths of data and things like this. So it's great to have the chance to really think about the amazing things that are happening, and it feels like there's so much potential for the future. And I really look forward to us setting some ambitious targets with the financial inclusion commitment and realizing them over the next few years, because it sounds like it's got the potential to make such a huge difference. I'd love to thank you both. It's been really great. I think I could talk to you about this all day, and unfortunately we can't, but thank you so much for your contributions today. Really, really appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.